Hello, everybody. Welcome to Man's Model Moments Midweek Model Meet, or 6M, or as it might be otherwise described. Just myself at the moment in the chat. Hopefully, we will get a couple more joining us. As always, those who are in the Discord have the invite already, so my computer's just doing some odd things. Just hang on a second. There we go. Let's try to open a program. I don't want to do video editing, thank you. It's a bit premature for that. So yes, tonight, the topic that I was going to talk around tonight was one actually suggested by Mario. I see he is in the chat, so good evening. And let's just scroll back through the chat. So Mario actually suggested this on the community post, but I'll just go through and say hello to people. So we have Fenris. Hopefully Fenris can join after he's finished working. Mario, as I mentioned, Gary from Gremlins Model and Mayhem. We have Taggers. Good evening, Taggers. We got John Alec. Good evening, John. Who else do we have? Julian. Good evening. John Christmas. David Markey. Who else do we have? David Barber. Lots of Davids. A lot of Davids. Just going through. David Barber. Not sure if I mentioned David Barber, but another David. And that brings me up to the top bit. Okay. So the topic is choosing a manufacturer and subject, or whether, based on your skill level, where you are in your modeling journey, and whether manufacturers have different skill levels, I guess, is part of that topic, right? And I think it's a really interesting question, right? It's a really wide and debatable topic, because I think there is definitely something to be said that when you start in your modeling journey, you want something fairly basic, or at least not too complex, but not just, 3 pieces or, well, having said that, maybe you do want 3 pieces. But I think if you're getting into scale modeling, you want to actually create something. So you want to build something. So it's not just a matter of, there are plenty of things like corgis, sort of, let's call them display models. Yeah. So things that you can just buy, usually die cast, already painted, pre-painted, often limited edition or whatever. They can cost a lot of money. If you just want to have a subject like that, there's plenty of options. So I think if you're getting into modeling, it's because you want to create something. You want to be part of that creative process, right? And that can come for a number of reasons, right? It can be from you just want something to fill the time. You enjoyed it when you were younger and want to get back to it, just to feel that kind of experience again. You enjoyed the hobby before, so you want to do that. You may want to challenge yourself. It may be a mental health thing. So you just feel that you just want something to take yourself away from the hustle and bustle of, normal life and stuff. But you want to be somehow in that creative process, not just buying something that's done, right? But when you start, even if you're coming back, because I have a lot of people coming into the shop who are getting back into the hobby after an extended hiatus, right? And that's a very, very common way to come back to the hobby. So you'll start, I don't know, I started around when I was about 6. It's like some of my earliest memories. And I know I was a couple of years younger than 8, because 8 I moved, or I didn't move, my family moved. And my memories, those early memories, are of like the old house. And my dad used to keep some of the models behind the sofa. One I remember was an old, I think like an Arabian musket or something. Can't remember who did the kit now. I think it might have been Revell, might have been Airfix, but huge, huge long thing stuck all the way behind the sofa. And sorry. And so, you know, if you've been a modeler sort of during those very early formative years, I would say from that sort of age, I think 6 is probably is about as early as people got into it, all the way through to kind of, 15, 16, starting at that sort of age. I think, I mean, you can start at any age, obviously, but I think during that sort of time, so let's call it up to puberty, right? When you're still very impressionable, you're still learning a lot, you've still got, finding out what interests you in the world. The things that you do then are often things that you come back to, and whether that's, music or fashion or friends or whatever, it's often things that you return to, right? So I think if you're returning to something, to modeling after that time, after a break of say 10, 20, 30 or more years, things change, right? And modeling is one of those things that has changed quite a bit in that intervening period. So I think when you come back into it, you don't want to, you'll have a kind of image of what you remember, but actually you're either going to go back and maybe do some of those old kits, that's fine, or you're going to approach it fresh and just, say what is here. And those are two different approaches, but whatever you do, I still think you're not going to jump in with like the most complex thing, right? And of course, I wouldn't recommend that. So if you think about, you want something which is a challenge, yes, but something that's relatively easy together. If you are starting for the first time, if you are of that, age, pre-puberty kind of impressionable young adult, then of course you want your first experiences to be good. And if you're buying a model for somebody like that, then it's important that it goes together well, that you get good experiences from that. And I've mentioned this in various streams on Airfix and Chill and on some of my videos. Having good experiences, and even within a kit, if you can like break it down into making little achievements along the way, it gives you much better positive reinforcement, positive feedback. So all of this, what I'm saying, is basically common sense, right, for getting into modeling generally. Now, if you take a look at manufacturers, not all manufacturers are created equal. Obviously, I have the video on the best model company. It will be coming out on Saturday. I kind of set it because of all of the catalog releases coming out last week. Epics and Chill got this midweek. I thought we'll leave it, get a nice separation, do it on Saturday. It means it could be, there's no problems with rushing and all that kind of stuff. But going through all of that and looking at different manufacturers along the way, not all manufacturers are equal. We're all aware of that, I think. And some, especially the niche manufacturers, especially those that people, a lot of people were just like, oh, well, I'll mention Edward again because Edward came up again in a comment. Edward produce really nice kits, right? And in fact, so I did a video last year about what kits under £15, good to get into modeling. And I stand by what I said in that. I probably do need to revisit it for 2024 because things have moved on, even in a year. And I didn't really consider Airfix because I hadn't had that exposure to Airfix at that time. So all of the things I said in that still stand, right? So you want something to be relatively simple, so at least have a good fit, and not have too much complexity in terms of both finish And so that is like putting the kit together, that building it, and the scheme you're going to do, and that includes the decals as well. So I wouldn't recommend, for instance, anybody to start off with ICM's Ghost of Kiev kit, for instance, because it's a 1990s kit, so it's before they introduced their CAD, and so it's not of their current state. It's like an old Zvezda kit, so the fit's okay, and an intermediate model won't have any problems with it. It's a couple of bits that you need to be wary of, but otherwise, the detail's a bit soft, but it builds up into a nice model. There are some areas that need filling and sanding and careful alignment. Again, intermediate modelers aren't going to have any problems, but a starter modeler might. The finish, so it requires like an overall coat of a light grey, and underneath it's like an off-white. And then you have the decals, which are digital camo. And they are huge and super difficult to use. So a new modeler, I can almost guarantee, is not going to get through those decals, right? An intermediate modeler, they're challenging, but they're okay, and the end result looks great, So things like ICM, companies like ICM, I'll include Mini Art here as well. Companies that are actually making excellent kits now, but they're making excellent kits for experienced modelers, right? So they have high part count generally. Even a basic ICM kit does. A company like Edward doesn't have high as a part count as those, but if you go for a Profit Pack version, it's got etched, but it's got photo etch in it, etched brass, which a starter is not going to get on with. Let's face it, intermediate modelers, some of them like it, some of them don't. So those kind of general rules, right? Now, if you look at manufacturers and the kinds of kits they produce, there are general themes, right? Like I said, with ICM, Mini Art, high numbers of parts, high levels of detail, good fit, but quite complex. And a high part count isn't necessarily in of itself a bad thing. A lot of people really like that. But if you're starting off, that could seem like a slog. So I'll give you a simile. Think of a jigsaw puzzle. If you're doing a jigsaw, if you've never done a jigsaw puzzle before, but you think, I like the idea of that, probably don't start off with a 2,000 piece puzzle, with tiny little pieces which are all the same shape, of a subject which includes 50% sky and 50% sea, with some subjects in or amongst those. Even a 2,000 piece jigsaw puzzle which has a relatively interesting picture is going to be challenging just from the sheer slog through it. So I think that are a number of things that you need to balance, sort of depending on where you are in your modeling journey. So let's start with let's look at some of the manufacturers and think about where they sit in that. And I'll start with Airfix, because I think Airfix are probably, thinking about that, but probably one of the best manufacturers, if you just think of a manufacturer, to get into modeling in 2024. So they have specific starter kits. Now, whether there's another thing here, okay? Starter kits. So Moss and I went through starter kits on Beyond the Box. If you've not seen that episode or heard that episode, it's on the Beyond the Box. It's on YouTube or on your podcast player. Check that out, because everything I think we said in there is applicable here. Most companies' starter sets, Airfix included, are lacking. Okay. Now, the kit in Airfix's starter sets are excellent starter sets like that, excellent starter kits. What lets them down is the glue, it's the paint. The brushes are okay. But as a starter, you're kind of relying on those paints and things as well. So as a package, the starter sets I don't feel are great. If I were to recommend coming in like for a beginner modeler who has never done anything before, like we're looking at that, let's say a 15-year-old, boy or girl, they buy an Airfix starter set, that's going to be fine because they're probably going to make mistakes anyway, which go beyond, the glue's ability to help them or the paint's ability to help them. So it's really the experience of putting it together, and they might get frustrated on the paint and stuff later on down it, but hopefully it gives them enough of that. And if they've got a creative bent, it probably will. Enough of that hook to just get them to want to do the next piece, right? And that's really what we're talking about. So Airfix starter sets are fantastic. If you're coming back to modeling after a break, I would say the Airfix starter sets are really good, but ditch the paint and glue. So use your own glue. The precision poly from either Humbrol or Revell is really good place to start with. In fact, I would recommend that over going to liquid glue because it's a little bit different if you're used to using the old, more gel type glues to start with anyway, and there's still a place for it. So I think that gives you then a really good compromise, because it's always going to be a compromise, right? Between number of parts, the detail included, and how easy it is put together, right? So you've got to think, if you think of those three things, yeah, you've got, that's in the kit. Those are three things that you're balancing as a starter. So again, if you check out my video on the starter kits, all of the kits I talk about there have some compromise there. So Tamiya kits are pretty good for starters. Certain Tamiya kits. So again, the older ones, I would say, are suitable for starters because generally the fit is okay. The fit is generally pretty good, and the price is low. So the ideal ones, I think, are kind of from the 90s, because Tamiya picked up quite a lot in the 90s in terms of quality of molding and detail. The fit is still there. The parts count isn't too high. So it's a good compromise between all those things. And then you can think about the other things like, what is the finish going to be of this? And then you can choose your subjects appropriately. So I think Tamiya is a good, solid recommendation. So I think Airfix starter sets or starter kits, or any of their kits that are around that sort of size. So if you think of like the Tempest and the Typhoon and these kinds of things, anything made sort of from 2016 onwards. Again, Airfix doesn't have a very high part count, and the detail is pretty good. So it gives you enough to work on. The fit to be able to get those positive feedback wins, without getting bogged down in a lot of complexity or a lot of problems that with fit and things. So Airfix and Tamiya, I think, are really good kits to start with. Revell, likewise, if you know what you're doing and know what you're choosing, make some really good kits suitable for starters. They also, so Revell is like a minefield, right? 90% of the time you're, well, no, maybe not 90, 60% of the time going through a minefield, you're okay. It's the 40% you got to worry about. Now, if you know it's a minefield, and if you know you're going to buy Revell and you're familiar with scale mates, you can go and pick out and avoid the mines, right? So you want to avoid all of their old toolings. Anything pre-1980, discount entirely from Revell, I would say, as a starter, as a beginner. Whether you're fresh into it or coming back. So Revell is a bit of a... It's hit and miss. It is a minefield. So it really depends on, where you are and where you want to get into. So I'm just going to go and stop there for a minute. So Airfix, Tamiya, some Revell. Let me just go back to the chat just so I'm not missing anything. Okay, so here we go. Decided to get back into modeling recently after many years. Picked up an Edward Profi kit as a first one back. Good luck. So I absolutely agree. The quality of Edward moldings is really good. I wouldn't recommend a Profi pack for a starter. I would recommend a weekend edition, because the weekend editions are just the plastic. So it's basically what you would get like with an Airfix kit or a Tamiya kit or whatever. So it doesn't have all the photo etch, doesn't have all that messing about. And of course, the price is obviously quite a lot lower as well. So it gives you the opportunity to get back into things without having to deal with photo etch, which is always good. Because some people just, even intermediate advanced modelers, a lot of us don't want to use photo etch because it's the spawn of the devil. Now, Hasegawa. So Gary bought a Hasegawa F4 Phantom. The instructions are dreadful. So, Hasegawa. Let's just take a quick pause and from the chat, just talk about Hasegawa. Hasegawa, back in the 1980s, was kind of one of those manufacturers that made a lot of 1/72nd scale armor, made a lot of 1/72nd scale aircraft, and some 48th aircraft as well, some 35th scale armor stuff. It was known for having like high quality, like engraving, molding, slightly brittle plastic, or slightly hard plastic, I should say. Generally went together pretty well. Fairly low detail internally, generally, and awful instructions, right? They really haven't changed. So, and you'll see this on Saturday with the video. Hasegawa are basically the same company that they were, and it's very typical of Japanese companies being very stable, being very well, non-dynamic might be a good word for it. Slow and steady, right? And Hasegawa is very slow, it seems. Again, only speaking as an outsider looking in. So again, Hasegawa, it depends what you're looking for from a model, but as a starter, there are probably much better options to get back into the hobby with. Not that Hasegawa don't make nice kits. I've got a Hasegawa 1/48 scale A7E Corsair to do. Quite looking forward to it. Looks really nice. It still has all of those same foibles, though. It still has quite basic detail in the cockpit. Quite hard, not very flexible plastic. It's got nice engraved panel lines, and I think it's a like 1986 kit or something, the original tooling, something like that. But instructions, yeah, they still have black and white fold-out instructions. You'll see that, I think, in the F-35 comparison video I did. Hasegawa, Fujimi, a lot of the Japanese manufacturers still have these very traditional fold-out sheets. I don't know if I've got one here, actually. I think I've cleared away most of the stuff, so I don't think I have. But they're not very intuitive. They're fine, but they often have Japanese text and English. Some of the English sometimes is transliterated rather than translated, especially in the older kits, so they might not make that much sense. And because it's all crammed in there, they do feel quite crammed, and they're often quite small. Hasegawa, especially 1/72 scale kits, the instructions, the leaflet is like this and then like folds out. Really inconvenient. Okay. Okay, the last time we made a model was in the 1990s. Prior to that was late 70s. There's been a slight change in 4 decades. There has indeed. I mean, fundamentally, it's the same hobby, right? It's just the changes have really occurred in the manufacturers, and in some of the way that they design kits now, which just makes them better, or should do. Okay, Martin says, I built lots of Edward, Tamiya, and Italieri kits with just a few Airfix other kits. Airfix was more a starter firm for me. Yeah. So the other one that you mentioned there, which I was going to come on to, so it seems like a good segue into that, is Italieri. And Italieri, again, Italieri have some good and some bad kits, right? Now, if you are unconcerned with accuracy, right, because there are things that some modelers prize that as a newcomer you may not, and often don't. And the accuracy of the subject, how many rivets are on something. I'm talking about levels, degrees of accuracy. If it looks like a Spitfire, rather than as opposed to, there's some small thing wrong because they say it's a Mark 9C, and actually the 9C didn't have this particular starter hole. And, there's levels of accuracy in things. Most people, when they start or come back, aren't too concerned about, this is 2 millimeters too far to the right or whatever. In general, big generalizations, obviously. Itileri often, I feel, on simplification sometimes rather than accuracy. So I'm sometimes criticized for that. But I've actually always had fairly good experiences with Atelieri kits. Now, is the fit always perfect? No, but I wouldn't say the fit is bad. Generally, it's pretty good. The newer stuff is better than the older stuff, but actually the older stuff isn't too bad. Unless you're going back to like the really old stuff, like the supermodel stuff that they bought back in the 70s. And that is of its time, but often subjects that you can't get anywhere else. So if you think about the SM79, the Spadavievo, that came out in the 90s, it's a nice kit. It's a lovely kit. It's got nice interior detail. Would I recommend it to a starter? Absolutely not. I wouldn't recommend any Italian subject generally because the finishes are hard for a starter, right? To get a satisfactory result from, because again, a starter, I mean, we all want to create something we're proud of, right? As a starter, it's harder sometimes to create a finish that we're proud of. And so you want to set yourself a fairly low bar to start with, or lower bars rather than like maxing it out. You don't start off saying, I want a chrome finish on my on my aircraft, right? Because that's hard to do for anybody. But Teleri, I think, kind of peaked, I would say, in the late 90s, early noughties. And it's not that they haven't moved forward from there, but they haven't moved forward as far as some other companies, I don't think. So Teleri can be good for a starter. Maybe I would say it's your second or third kit. Teleri do, again, some interesting subjects that people don't generally do as a mainstream injection molding company. The one I would put in front of them would be Academy. So Academy do some really nice kits. An Academy kit, I would say, age for age compared to an Atelier kit is better generally in terms of fit. Again, often simplified in terms of internal detail, like ejection seats on 72nd scale aircraft, or some accuracy issues. But if you think the Academy Liberator has been the standard 172nd Liberator for 30 years or more, now Airfix is finally coming out with one this year. I mean, that's a long time to have that mantle, right? So Academy kit's generally pretty good. And the more recent stuff, I mean, the F-35, I think the F-35s that they do are the best F-35s, including Tamiya's kit as well. I think the Academy one is better in terms of the detail that they've rendered, the accuracy overall. And the Tamiya kit is excellent, right? Their F-35 is fantastic. 72nd scale I'm talking about here, of course. But the Academy one gives you a better bang for your buck, and actually a slightly better end result. An equally skilled modeler, I think, will create a better, more accurate model of the Academy kit than the Tamiya kit. Is it easier to create an end result with the Tamiya kit? Maybe. But you're splitting hairs. There's not much between them. So Academy, I think, actually have some good kits that are suitable for beginners because the fit is generally pretty good. They're not requiring a lot of you. They do good engraved detail. And again, they did feature quite a bit in the cheap beginners kits that I recommended. Principally, I'll get onto finishes and things in a minute, but here I'm just talking about the build. Okay, so those are kind of the companies that I would naturally think of and naturally say to somebody, if somebody came into the shop, and where they were talking about their, a gift for a 15-year-old or 12-year-old, or they were getting back into modeling after a while, those are kind of where I would start those models. Either select Revell kit, an Airfix, probably 72nd aircraft, or one of the starter AFVs, or if they're cars, one of the starter cars. An Italieri kit, again, selected, or an Academy kit would be a good place to start. The other thing I would say, so that is kind of how I would look at if someone is starting their journey or restarting their journey. Those are the manufacturers that I'd consider to start with. Then you start getting into things like subject and finish, which are sub parts of that, and that can actually change things, right? Edward would be one that I would recommend if somebody, when we got to talking about that subject matter, like what interests you, because I think one of the most important things when you're coming back to modeling, and I've mentioned this many times in Airfix and Chill, is do something you love. Don't start off thinking, I'm going to do something just to practice so that I get my skills up and then I can do something I love, because you might not get there. You might get put off before it. Do something you love to start with. You can always come back and redo like the same kit or another kit or a different scale of the same subject. So absolutely do that kit that you've always wanted to do, or the subject that you wanted to do. Now that can change what manufacturer you will look at, because if I'm going to be looking at, say, the F-35, the F-35 has inspired me, or I work on it as ground crew or whatever, so I want to do an F-35, Edward are not going to be the manufacturer for you. Likewise, if you're interested in anything other than aircraft, Edward are not going to be the manufacturer for you. So I don't think you want to limit it too much by thinking just manufacturer to start with. I think of the subject, think of the sort of thing you want to do, then look at the manufacturer, and then start to pick it apart of, okay, what am I actually going to do? Which kit, finish all that kind of stuff. Just going back to the chat. Tamiya Extra Thin was a revelation for me. One of my pet hates is too much glue. Yeah, Tamiya, well, no, I'll retract that. Tamiya Extra Thin is not the end of the world, the great revelation. Liquid solvent cement. Okay, it doesn't really matter who makes it. Tamiya Extra Thin, everybody knows about, but Mr. Hobby, there is Plastic Weld, there's Plastic Magic, there's all kinds of different brands of it. It's all basically the same stuff, either exactly the same sort of formulation or different types of solvent with slightly different properties. But liquid solvent, basically a pure solvent that melts the plastic and rebinds those styrenes together. Little styrene monomers, fix them together. So they absolutely are revolutionary in terms of the way they build kits. I still wouldn't recommend them to an absolute beginner as your first foray. I think that's where once you've done a kit or two, you start introducing different pieces, right? And I mentioned this in several of the videos I've done on, starter tools, intermediate tools, and advanced tools. Walk before you can run. We talked about this in airbrushing on Monday in Airfix and Chill. Get something that you can get comfortable and get the skills with to start with. And Revell Contactor, the precision cement. So we're talking about the one little needle on, or Homebrew Precision Poly are great because they give you a little bit more working time, so it's easier on a starter. And they are that traditional. You put the glue on and then you put them together, rather than you put them together and then put the cement on. So it's a different way of working. So, and also liquid cement, especially for younger. Well, there's a couple of things. There's the health pieces. It's far easier to absorb more liquid cement than it is a precision poly. So there's that health aspect, and especially when you're younger, your lungs are much more vulnerable. So again, also because it flows so much, it's really easy to get it in, and like capillarity will draw the glue not only between that join, but if you put loads on, it'll get it between the plastic and your fingers, and that's where you end up with big fingerprints all over. So it's a slightly developed skill to use a liquid solvent cement. So that's why I always say start with the precision poly. Even when you're using Tamiya Extra Thin, there'll still be places where the precision poly is better or gives you a better working time, for instance, like large surfaces, large kits, deep, like big joins and stuff. Let me have a look at this one. The other day I watched a YouTube Airfix starter set, and he started off claiming the set included everything needed to make the model. He then proceeded to use 5 things not in the kit. Yes. So the starter challenge, I've done a couple of starter challenges. One was on the Mary Rose. It's actually a super popular video for some reason. But the rules of the starter set challenge is that you only use what's in the starter set with some small deviances. So one is a model knife, because you need some way of detaching parts from the sprue and getting rid of the burrs on them. And the only manufacturer, I think, at the moment that makes a complete starter set is Italeri, who do model sets which include actual like nippers. I'm not sure if they include a knife or not, but they include file, glue, paints, brush, everything. So you just buy that set. But you're absolutely right. An Airfix starter set is everything you need on the modeling side. It's not on the tool side. So you do at least need a modeling knife. And then usually, people allow themselves like water for diluting the paints, because the paints are always horrendously under soluted. Greetings from Chicago. Well, hello to the Windy City. I've only ever been through Chicago. I've flown through Chicago a lot, the very first time I did, I found out why they called it the Windy City when the aircraft got down to about just under 1,000 feet, I guess. We actually flew past, because when you're coming from, certainly from the UK, generally you fly past Chicago Airport. Well, it depends on the wind direction, of course, but you go by and then you turn around, do 180 and then land. And so we went past the airport, turned around, we got down to about 1,000 feet, and then the thing was just thrown around like a plastic toy. Yeah, it's windy. But yeah, I used to fly out of there quite a lot on my way to Indianapolis, because I used to work for a little company based in West Lafayette. Other people joining. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where in the world you are. ScaleMate is indeed your best mate, not only for Revell kits. So I always have ScaleMates handy on my mobile phone whenever I go to a model show, because you'll see a kit that you've not seen before. I saw one, can't remember what it was, B58 or something. It was something, I looked at it, and not a manufacturer I'd ever heard of. Looked up on ScaleMates, and it was an old Revell, like 1960s tool. I was just like, yeah, no, I don't want that. Hello, Dave. Hopefully you got my message about the decals. I don't know why the shop let you buy them, because it shouldn't have done, because you're outside the UK, but we will work it out. So I sent you a message. I haven't checked my messages since I sent it, so if you've replied, apologies, but the decals haven't arrived yet. John's posted them to me with the package, so they'll be arriving at some point very shortly, I imagine, and then they'll all go out. Let's see, what else do we have? Yeah, this is a primary problem with a lot of manufacturers. So the manufacturers that are worse at it, well, Revell stands head and shoulders above any other company in reboxing other people's stuff, old stuff, without giving you any transparency at all. It's the worst thing about Revell, in my opinion. In fact, I had a shipment from Revell yesterday. An order that I placed came through, and so I'm very selective what I have in the shop, right? I only put things in my shop that I would be happy to recommend and do myself, yeah, and be happy that I could actually recommend them to like a 15-year-old or a person returning after 30 years in good conscience, yeah. The only exception to that are the second-hand kits, where it's just like, yeah, these are second-hand, and usually if you're buying second-hand, you're buying because you know what you're doing. You're returning to the hobby, and you know what you're looking for. And if people do look at the second-hand stuff like, oh, I could buy this, I'd be just like, have you done this kit before? And warn them about it. But the Revell shipment came in. Their shipping boxes that they ship stuff out in are fantastic. They're actually really thick card, like probably more than 5 millimeters thick, corrugated card. They are big, rigid boxes, and they actually have a lid on them. So they're not a fold-up thing. They're a drop-on lid, and they're shipping boxes. If only they adopted their shipping box strategy for their actual boxes, it'd be great. But their shipping boxes, really good. Packaging, really good. I got some Bandai kits. So I got some A-Wings, a B-Wing, all of their Star Wars, the little kits. They're like £7, and they're good for anybody who likes Star Wars or for kids. Good, cost-effective, easy to put together, easy to get something out. Ideal starter kits, for again, talking about do subjects you love. If you're a kid who's like got into Star Wars, do those kits, Do they have the greatest detail in the world? No. Do they have obvious seams and stuff? Yeah, they do. But if you're an advanced modeler or an intermediate modeler who's going to do that, you know that, and you're going to put the work into to feel that. If you're not, it doesn't matter. If you're a kid, you just want to make an X-wing, you got an X-wing at the end of it that you made, that's cool, right? So I got those. I got there's a Marder, a grill, the Horton GO229. There was the new ARE 555, which isn't new, it's a 90s kit, but it's a good kit. Got the new Airbus 330-300. So got all this stuff in, and it's like, these are all nice kits. Revell has the ability, and not only to do their own kits like the Airbus, but also to rebox transparently other companies like the Bandai stuff, which isn't cheap, but it's good, and so they'll tell you when it benefits them. If everything about Revell's business was like their packaging and their business terms and delivery and all of that, and their rep's a really nice guy, that'd be fantastic. Unfortunately, it's not. So they have such little transparency with what they put in their boxes. Even as a retailer, I had to go through their price list with ScaleMates to work out what I wanted to get, because I wanted to avoid all the 1950s crap, because the pricing doesn't change for it. Now, if you look at Tamiya's pricing is reflective of the age of the tool. So that's actually really good for a starter, because a starter you can buy a 148 scale Tamiya kit for under £15, and it's not bad. The Corsair is a lovely kit, the 48 scale Corsair. The Sea Harrier is very inaccurate, but it's not a bad kit. But it fits together okay. There are some bits which are, not fantastic, but if you're a beginner, there are no tiny fiddly pieces. There are some bits which are a bit fiddly, but nothing, terrible. And it fits together. It's not a huge number of parts, and it's something that you can just slap together and feel positive about, Airfix used to be terrible about boxing that old stuff. Now, of course, with the Vintage Classics range, it's much easier. I actually had there's a young guy comes in. He used to only be like 10, 12, something like that. He and his mum come in. They came in twice this week, or once on Saturday, once this week. They've been a few times before. And one of the things they did was look at the Wessex, the Western Wessex helicopter, the Vintage Classic, because he can never decide what he wants, which is, understandable, because it's like literal kid in a candy shop, I remember being exactly the same, just not knowing what to buy because you don't want to make the wrong decision. And, at that age, it's a big thing. And his mum said, what about this helicopter? And she asked me, is this? And I was like, anything that's Vintage Classics is going to be tough, You don't want to recommend something that is going to put somebody off like that. But because it's easily distinguishable, it's just like, she understood that. She put that back. They ended up getting an Airfix Stuka. And, that level of transparency is fantastic. Companies like Italieri tend to be okay in some areas. In other areas, like they've released a bunch of stuff this year, or are releasing a bunch of stuff this year, which is the old Max plastic kits from the 60s, which at the time were streets ahead. I did one recently, the Airfix boxing of it from 1972 or something. But it's not sold as a Reeboks Max factory. They've obviously bought the molds, and they're selling it as Italieri kits in 2024. So you still have to be careful, and ScaleMates is by far the best tool that you have in your armory to prevent yourself against disappointment. Let's have a little look. Part 2 of the ranking is a new nuclear fusion of the hobby, always dropping next Saturday. Yes, I appreciate it has been delayed. This is the second Saturday that it's been delayed to, but unless there are some unknown catalogs that I don't know about dropping, it will definitely happen this Saturday. Yeah, I must admit, Simon, I feel exactly the same way. Do they put the date of tooling on the kits? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that anybody actively does it. It depends. I mean, the copyright sometimes tells you, but again, do people really want to go to that level of detail and examination? I mean, clarity in most areas of consumer and retail law is required, but it does seem that we are a little bit behind in that regard. Oh, there we go. Airfix do put tooling dates on the outside of boxes. Thank you, Julian. This is also a very good point, Powell. So inevitably, as you get older, usually around the age of 50, this is not a detractor for the old or the aging, I would say. I have passed that point myself, so I know firsthand. It doesn't matter how good your eyesight is, as you get older, basically your eye becomes less flexible. So it's more difficult for your eye muscles to flex your eye to change your vision focus depth, and that typically happens. You'll notice yourself if you notice yourself your eyes hurting after a while of like reading or looking at something. That's usually an indication it's starting. And if you look at it further away, see, this is why you find older people like holding a book and they'll start to hold it further away, because your short vision starts to go, because your eyes want to relax more. They find it harder to pull in more. Thankfully, there are, of course, in our hobby, I think they're downstairs at the moment, the sexy gogs that kind of compensate for that allow you that close-in focus. But it is definitely something that you should consider. I found myself naturally gravitating towards larger kits. Part of that is because my natural modeling journey has got me there, because I want to see more detail, and you get more detail at larger scales. But also it has the other effect that as my eyesight gets worse, the smaller stuff is less enjoyable, It's just going through. The biggest thing I don't like about Airfix starter sets is the painting decal instructions are only available on the box and not in actual paper instructions. Yeah. So, as I said, starter sets themselves. So I'm just going to adjust this a little bit. Ooh, it's looking a little bit drunk there. There. Come on, get where I want you to. There we go. There are no starter sets on the market, I feel, that are ideal. It's one of the things I've actually been thinking about doing in the shop, is putting like a starter package together, like a deal. It's just how to make it work, to get all the pieces, because you don't want to be saying it's like a certain kit. So that means it's a range. you know, because you want people to have the choice of like, I want a World War One fighter or a World War Two, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, it's a difficult thing to kind of, not being a manufacturer and having, you know, being able to control the costs. The cost of what I buy is out of my control. You know, it's set by the manufacturers. I can only control what I purchase. And there are no ideal starters. I think Airfix produced the, well, I think, in fact, they're the only company that specifically tools starter kits. So that, I think, is ideal. Having said that, I hate the fact that the starter kits are in end opening boxes. You know, I think a starter needs a top opening box more actually than the rest of us, you know, because they're more likely to not do it all in one, and or to, you know, need somewhere to put the pieces or lose bits and stuff. And not having like a proper, you know, painting scheme is a bit of a bugbear. So yeah, there are no ideal starter sets, I think, which is a real shame. Just like there are no ideal starter tool sets, which is why I went out and, you know, sourced one myself, because I couldn't, in all honesty, sell anybody a Revell or a Humbrol or an Atelieri starter tool set. I would feel like a thief. You know, I only believe in selling things that I believe in, you know. Just going through. I would disagree, Richard. Poor detail, no rivets. That's not the case with the newer tools. So if you were talking about, so if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have agreed with you, because that was my experience. If you're talking about post 2016 production, I mean, if you look at, and again, I'm not just talking about starter kits here, although some of the starter kits are really nice. The Gannet, you know, I finished that about 6 weeks or so ago. It has amazing detail, fantastic. The riveting detail on that is some of the best I've seen in a kit ever, regardless of manufacturer. It was super easy, and maybe this is because I was using Outlaw as base paint, but doing the oil wash over it and then taking the oil wash off, absolutely fantastic. Rivet detail, really good. So the earlier kits, maybe like the 2010, 2011, 2012, some of those, you know. But if you think about what you're getting for £8 or £8.99 in a starter set from Airfix, it doesn't bear comparison to with what you were getting 20 years ago from any manufacturer at that price point. So, you know, we'll agree to disagree. Yes. So there are indeed old cockpits, which, in fact, some of the even earlier cockpits weren't just like an L shape that the pilot sat on. And actually, that Firefly, is it here? Yeah. This Firefly is a little bit like that. You know, it has that kind of L-shaped molding, which counts as the bulkhead and the seat all in one. But there were some manufacturers, Revell, some of the early Revell ones, Monogram stuff, they just molded like half of the two fuselage halves. It would come across and meet in the middle, and they would just put the pilot's head on one side. So there was nothing, you know. Dear. So photo etch is a particular poison, perhaps is the word. And I'll add. Sorry, John. I don't know if you've been waiting there long.
Not at all, buddy.
Lost in my own thoughts.
No, don't worry. I thought I'd just come in and join you, just for
more than welcome.
Social company.
Yeah, I mean, photo etch is a particular. It's a bit like spicy food, right? Some people love it, some people tolerate it, some people hate it. And like with spice in food, it has its place, right? And for me, I think some photo etch really enhances a kit. However, some photo etch I think is worse than the part it's supposed to replace. Definitely worse than what you can do with other materials, and is just it's like a font of frustration. And I'll give you an example. Is the new Fairy Delta 2, the Dora Wings kit, includes a little photo etch frame in it. Two of the pieces are, I think they're vortex strakes for the wings. So they give a really scale thickness to those. Four of the pieces are, because the Fairy Delta 2 was obviously a research aircraft, so the pitot tube is cast into one half of the front of the fuselage. But on the end of a lot of research pitot tubes, they have the little additional pieces that come out. You know, there's little strakes with additional probes and things. Bear in mind, this is 1/72 scale. They are in photo etch, and I think they are about 2 millimeters by 2 millimeters by the thickness of the photo etch, each of those. No, thank you. It's just like, yeah, you might be able to tell that they're not there, but you probably won't. So I probably won't. I don't know. What's your thoughts on photo etch, John?
They echo yours. So sometimes they really come in handy because they can be in scale, right? So if there's something really thin that they just couldn't mold in plastic that thin, great. And then the second part of your comment there, I found that on the Jackal too. So they had it's called a sand trap, or it's the thing that they put under the wheels to get over.
Yeah.
And there is absolutely no way I could have made that without, at least $50 worth of bending tools and a lot of experience in bending PE. I mean, I'm not an idiot, but I try. It's just like, there's no way I can do this. I had to download, an STL file, and I had to print it out in resin because there was no way I was going to be able to use that PE part. And, I just wish they had just given you an option, right, of being able to just slap on the front of the of the Jackal 2 a plastic. Yeah, it just was not necessary. And then when they PE mold, what do they call them? Butterfly. We call them butterfly nuts.
Oh yeah, yeah.
When they're less than a millimeter, it's like there is absolutely so. The amount of CA glue that I'm going to use to put that butterfly nut on is going to be 20 times bigger than the butterfly nut. There's just no way I'm going to be able to put it on. So yeah, I agree.
I also find that when you put on pieces that small, because obviously you only have that tiny attachment point where the CA glue is touching, and the two materials don't really want to glue together. I mean, CA glue is great stuff, but it doesn't really want to interact with plastic. It's not ideal. And I always feel that when I get to any sort of weathering, that piece is just I'm gonna do some like accidentally dry brush it or something, and it's gonna vanish. It's just going to fly somewhere and enjoy a life of freedom somewhere in the carpet.
I agree with you.
What about manufacturers in terms of this general question then, John, in terms of the kind of level of where you are on your modeling journey and manufacturers? Do you find that you've changed the manufacturer that you sort of have as your go-to as you've gone through your journey, or are there manufacturers that you just keep returning to, or are you just pretty broad spectrum?
So Tamiya would be a manufacturer that I just keep coming to because I grew up on those kits. I built those kits as a kid. I was born in '68, so mid '70s through the end of '70s, and in the '80s it was all I built Tamiya kits, and I've come back to those now because their new releases are, especially with cars. I don't build a lot of cars, but the cars are good. Yeah, I think as I got back into the hobby, 2007 or something, and then really got back into it back in maybe 2018, 2019. Mini art is kind of a new favorite. The new Hobby Boss kits are great. Academy, I like to build Academy kits. Yeah, the instructions are terrible, but I like Academy kits. I like to build them. Trumpeter, Hobby Boss. I've gotten into Hobby Boss now. Especially their new stuff. Thank you, Alex. You sent me that Hobby Boss P51D, which is like a starter set. It's a very basic kit. And it was a wonderful build. Tim built that as well, and he really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it, and it was it's a small, simple kit. It was great. It was old Hobby Boss.
I think the Chinese manufacturers have really come on in terms of a lot of people I think of them as I don't know, like inaccurate discount kind of kits, but that's not the experience that I've had of them, either as a retailer or as a builder. I've found the care that's put into packaging the things exceeds most other manufacturers to ensure that you get all the pieces as intended, which is what you want. Maybe that's because they're in China and don't have a great global support network, but that's fine. If I get everything right first time, I'm not too concerned about that. They've done the easy build kits. Moss has done quite a few of those as well. Simplified build. They've still got the detail, in terms of panel lines and stuff, so you can still focus on that aspect. So I think in terms of actually bringing people into the hobby, and the price points, of course, are actually pretty competitive. So I think that's something that a lot of modelers forget, that like when you're coming into the hobby, you don't have a stash, you might have a limited amount of funds to actually spend on kits. You have to buy all these other things as well. Once you're an established modeler, you've got a whole range of paints and things, but you have to buy 10 Tamiya paints, straight up. That's more than a kit, in terms of investment. And you've still got to buy the kit. So I think a lot of these things get forgotten once you kind of gone in a bit. The other thing I noticed, people, somebody was saying about the environmental impact of packaging, right? Which is valid, right? Yeah. I noticed in the last couple of Hobby Boss kits I've seen, it's all recyclable plastic packaging, and the only other manufacturers I've seen do that are Airfix and Revell. So it's like, well, you kind of expect it from the big Western manufacturers, to show that sort of leadership. But if China's getting on that bandwagon as well, it's like that's taking away some of those, the little points where they're eking out ahead in the West. It's just like, no, we'll claw that back as well. You want recyclable? Okay, we'll go recyclable. Yeah.
Yeah. That's always a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they have an excellent range of dinosaur diorama kits. That's an excellent point. Actually, it's another thing I kind of wanted to mention, and you mentioned it there, John, about cars, because I think a lot of the time, and I know, yeah, roughly 40% of modelers do aircraft, right? As a rough cut, but that still means that that's the minority, right? So most people actually aren't doing aircraft; they're doing other things, and when you think about, well, what manufacturers are good to start with, well, if you're doing cars, then you're not really talking about, well, obviously you're not talking about Edward, you're not really talking about Mini Art or Tacom or Meng. There's a couple, but it depends on what subject. But you are talking more of like, the Airfix, Hella, Revell, Tamiya, Hasegawa, Fujimi. So it's a different proposition than when you're looking at, who does aircraft or who does armor, which is a much broader range. So do you think that changes things when you're looking at, okay, what would I recommend to a starter who's coming to the hobby, who's interested in, I don't know, 1990s sports cars or modern racing cars?
Good question. In the 90s, when I was building cars, Revell and the Fujimi Hasegawa wasn't so much Tamiya. I've gotten into Tamiya cars now. Even then, even though I'm in the States, I wasn't building, the what do they call it, the round two stable, which is like MPC and AMT and all that kind of stuff. It was the yellow box Revell and Fujimi and Hasegawa. That's what I built, as cars. I think there's a big difference between the mold quality, the plastic quality between the sort of the American kits and the Japanese kits, and even sort of the Revell Germany kits. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I've not done a recent Revell sort of car molding.
And Aoshima as well. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Aoshima, I think I mentioned this on Airfix and Chill a while ago. I hadn't really even come across Aoshima. And they're a huge company, in terms of the amount of kits that they've made across the years, how long they've been going, sort of prevalence of some of their subjects. But they were just outside of my kind of main core niche. And those kits that were in that, I just availability meant that I never saw them, and I used to build ARI kits, the Japanese, the ARII. I think it's ARI, you say it, but they used to do the sort of obscure Japanese bombers and things. But yeah, I mean, Fujimi are an odd company as well. I find Fujimi, they do some really nice kits, but they do seem to make some big old balls ups as well.
They're very basic, and the plastic is very Hasegawa. It's very hard, brittle plastic. Yeah.
It's although it was funny because, of course, I went through all this testing all the bloody plastic of manufacturers over the last couple of weeks. The most brittle plastic I found was actually Revell's. So it's not hard, but brittle. So one of the ways, I think I mentioned this before, one of the ways I tested the plastic was by bending it then bending it back, and then bending it back. I couldn't make a 180-degree bend in any of the pieces of Revell plastic I tried. They all broke. They all sheared at about like 90 to 100 degrees. Even Hasegawa plastic was more flexible, harder, but more flexible, which is weird,
Yeah.
And I think I said this last time, actually. The Airfix plastic I couldn't break. It's just super flexible and quite soft, obviously. People complain about, but
Tacom plastic is probably and we were talking about this in the Discord, but Tacom plastic is probably the densest plastic I've ever worked with. Really
it's
dense.
interesting, isn't it? Because it's all polystyrene. So you would have thought, that they would have been broadly the same, but I don't know. It must be, I don't know, crosslinker that they put in, or like the temperatures they mold at, or I don't know how they get the different qualities, but there's quite a different range, Right, just looking at the... Okay, this is a good one. Isn't the whole point of a hobby to be fun? On the basis of kit that makes the experience of making it enjoyable would be a good starter. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think, Julian, that is the crux of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we talk about these things, we're speaking as either modelers making recommendations to others, to those who are just coming into the hobby or are thinking about the hobby. And for myself, I kind of extend that onto the retail side as well, as what I would recommend to somebody who's never done a model before but thinking about it. A situation I've been put in many times over the past 6 months, and it is. I mean, for me, I don't know about you, John, but especially as a retailer, because somebody is going to then spend money on what you say, that feels like a big kind of responsibility. I don't want to give. Ultimately, as you said, Julie, it's about fun, and you don't want to give somebody a bad experience on your recommendation, right? You don't want to. It's a bit like recommending a restaurant, and then somebody, oh, you must go to this restaurant; it's fantastic. And then your friends go and say it was the worst experience of their lives. You're just like, oh, sorry. Well, it was okay when we went.
And then they hold it against you. They're like, oh, man, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Won't ever take a recommendation from him again. Yeah. So I think a lot of people forget about that. The whole point of the hobby is to be fun. And, when we talk about accuracy and stuff, it's because those things, either the lack of accuracy detracts from our own personal enjoyment, or the pursuit of greater accuracy, kind of scratches some itch we have to, to achieve that, But I think it's when it becomes a barrier to other people's fun, when you start imposing it, and then we're talking about that tail edge of the Gaussian curve, that 0.1% or whatever, that will tell you, oh well, of course that was the wrong color. It's just like, I don't give a damn. It's just like, stop trying to spoil my fun. If I want it to be that color, I want it to be that color. If I ask you what color it should be, that's different. But don't tell me. Yeah. So I think, I think Airfix are probably one of the, from what I've seen of the designers, from what they've said in Sprue Talk and the interviews they've given and things, I think they're the one team that we really see that think about the experience of beginners and starters coming into the hobby, and the experience of the modeler, like Paramjit thinking about using parts to mask other parts while they're thinking about the process of modeling, which I think is that's really commendable, right? And sadly, I think the converse is true when a company just takes a 1950s or 60s kit, sticks it in a new box, throws some paint and glue and a hairy stick in there and says that's a starter kit. That's the opposite, right? That's just
Right.
like thinking we can make more money if we chuck all this shit together.
Right. Right. Who cares what their experience is?
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
sell it as a starter kit. Yeah.
Yeah.
She wants to know ice cube.
Oh, look at this. Airfix 172nd Angel Interceptor arrived yesterday. Molded in 1980, fit not so good, and flash everywhere.
Oh,
Yeah. But where else can you get an Angel Interceptor? That's the thing.
or a 1980 tooling that isn't now flash ridden, right?
Well, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
The Airfix 124 Spitfire Mark 90 is a great kit. I absolutely agree. Definitely Airfix best kit. I would have said it was the best kit up until its release. I think the Gannett's a better kit, actually, in terms of the engineering that's gone into it, the fit.
Interesting.
And I think the experience of others like Sully has done the Gannet and had the same to say of it. Everybody who I've spoken to that has done the Gannet has said it is the best Airfix kit they've ever done.
Wow.
I mean, I think many people have said, and I'm one of them, the fit of the wings into the fuselage, which is a complex join, right? It's got this because of the exits from the exhausts. It's got this kind of complex curve where the two wings go in. You can push fit that in. You don't need to cement it. I mean, the tolerance is incredible. Now, the Spitfire is good, but there are a couple of areas on it where I struggled, but you have to be careful with.
Correct.
The undercarriage. The undercarriage fits really well, a little bit too well. I mean, I had to use a lot of force to get those undercarriage pieces in. You don't need glue once they're in because the friction fit is so tight. But if you make a mistake, you're not getting them out. But it is absolutely a really, really good kit. They do some odd things with it, some odd emissions. But again, I think the Gannet just pips it. What else? Does Barney count? I don't think Barney counts as a dinosaur.
Stupendous.
There is actually another company. They were at Telford at Scale Model World. They're doing a limited run of Captain Scarlet stuff. I think of the new stuff as well. But it's super expensive and it's limited. There's like 100 or something. Penrith, please don't. Actually, I tell you what, if you remember the Airfix T-Rex that they did when it was, and I think it was only ever molded, like tooled once. I think most of those dinosaur kits, they only released once. But it was molded in purple plastic. And the reason I know that, or remember it, is that myself and my sister had the Airfix T-Rex and the Triceratops, respectively. And I remember making the kit, and my sister who's 3 years younger than me, right? And this would be, I don't know, I guess I was 12, maybe. So she would be 9. And she was eating something. We were having a meal one day, and she coughed, and she had a piece of purple plastic in her meal. And, it was a fairly big deal for my mum, and she found the meal, that she prepared from whatever packet and stuff, took it back to the supermarket, complained, all of this. She got her money back and some free things and things. And then found out that my T-Rex was purple plastic, and it was probably just a bit that I had snipped off. It ended up in her dinner. So So to that company, whoever you were, apologies. Oh dear. And to my sister, of course. No long-term health effects, thankfully.
Yeah. She didn't leave. So yeah. Zoe, be quiet. Oh my dog.
Just doing the job.
Yeah.
It's a job to warn us, Alec. Those old tubes of glue in the 70s where you snap the end off to get the glue out. Do you know, I actually had there were a couple of kits I got, a couple of second-hand kits I got in like a job lot of stuff. And one of them had the little capsule. I don't know if you remember those, John. It was like a little rubbery capsule, and you had to cut the end off, and then that was it. You had to use it then, right? That's why we ended up gluing all of our kits all at once, because once you'd opened it, it would dry out in like days or day or something. The other ones were the little, you have to get them in Japanese kits. They look like little oil paint things, like little lead metal bits of glue. Had some of those completely bone dry, never been opened, but because they were, I think, sealed and you're supposed to pierce the top, but they were wrapped from the bottom. So I don't think they were crimped, but I don't think they were actually sealed.
Okay.
So over time, obviously, just the solvent evaporated out. Yeah. When you open them, you get a few like dry wisps of of styrene that formed the glue, and that was it. Oh dear. Now, the good old polycement that would splurge out if you held the tube too long and got it warm. Poking a pin into free up the nozzle and sharpening a match to dab on glue. I still sell Revell contactor in the tubes is still sold. I still sell it, and there are people that preferentially buy it. So there are. You say it's old, but it's still going. Wow, there's a whole load of comments on tube glue. I didn't think that half of this would be about tube glue, but there you go. Single biggest reason potential model builders tried the hobby were discouraged from continuing as the glue is one big mess waiting to happen. I think one of the problems, and I don't know what you think, John, is that an Airfix still do this, and their instructions is they show you using the tube of glue on plastic, like directly.
Correct.
Yeah. And it's just like, no.
It's so 1970s, man.
I mean, the nozzle on that was like, they're about 3 millimeters wide.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the flow you get is enormous. Well, it's nothing and nothing and nothing, and then it's enormous, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I still don't know why. I know, in fact, I think it was Frog Instructions had part of it, and I actually have them here that showed you using a pin as well as the glue to like do a small bit instead. Okay, there it is. Oh, don't know if you can see that. Too bright, too much reflection. So just here, it actually shows you using a pin to put the glue on. And it's got this bit here, which shows you nicely putting the glue on, and then not to put big splodges of glue on. As though anybody tried to put big splodges of glue on.
Right.
Oh dear. Okay. West Lafayette. I know it well.
Yep. The Boilermakers. Yep.
Yep. I don't know if Have I told you this before? I used to work for a company based in West Lafayette. I think it was, is it Titan Way? 1228 Titan Way. Yeah, the CEO was a Purdue professor, a guy called Peter Kissinger. Completely insane, but nice guy. Please add a link to your YouTube Beyond the Box series. Tried a number of times to find it with no joy. Yeah, let me. There should be a link. Beyond the Box YouTube.
So Contacta it's tough to get here in the States. I've tried to get it because I want to try it, just to try it. I mean, I have my glue preferences, but it's not easy to find.
That's bizarre. I would have thought they would have. I thought it would be easy. Oh. Here we go. Link in the comments there. That is the YouTube link to Beyond the Box. But you can find it on any like iTunes or Spotify or anything like that. If you just want to listen to the audio version, you can find it on any of those without any issues. Just wanted to say the real meaning of title Windy City is the long-winded politicians from corrupt past. Well, especially in an election year, Jim, that is probably a very pertinent thing. I think I don't envy you guys and your choice. You are stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea, as far as I see it from this side of the pond. Not that we have a better choice, but yeah, I think that's a fair shout, right? You want to know when the tooling for the mold was produced, and classic tools should cost less. Yeah, I mean, companies should be rewarded for producing new tools and getting the return on the investment, and they have to run a business, and we all understand that. But when a tooling is 50 years old, it's paid its dues. And yes, there are some basic costs which don't change or increase with inflation, marketing, and keeping the lights on in the factory and all that sort of stuff. But even so, a little bit of leniency would be nice.
Excuse me.
So you do not sell a Teleri then, Alex? No, I do sell a Teleri kits. As I say, I don't think a Teleri kits are inherently bad. Say I've not really had kits of theirs which have had terrible fit. Is the detail the best? Generally not. Is it okay? Yeah, generally it is. Are there going to be some stinkers in their repertoire? Yeah, there will be, but there are in all companies' repertoires, right? I think again, it's about being aware of what you're buying, either as a retailer for me, so that I don't then have to think in the shop of like, I can't recommend this or that. I'd rather have a shop that just contains things that I'm happy to sell. Or as a consumer, go and check out ScaleMates, do your research before you buy something. Or the other thing is be happy with what you get, right? So if you go to a model show and you spend $5 on a kit, a 172nd bomber, that's cheap, right? And if it turns out to be a dog, as Mario has said here, use it for testing new techniques. If you buy a kit and you don't like the way it looks, then you can do two things, right? You can either sell it yourself, take it to your local model club or model shop or something, and either donate it to somebody or sell it cheap, sell it at a model show, or just use it as a test bed. Either put it together to learn, how to fill stuff, for instance. If it's a really gappy kit and you haven't done much filling and sanding, use it for that. If you want to practice different techniques, just airbrushing, then just prime pieces and try different techniques on that. There's always use for a kit. Doesn't matter how bad it is, you'll always find some use for it.
Alex, I have a question for you for your shop.
For sure.
Do you sell non, sort of scale model stuff? So do you sell trains or layout stuff or diorama stuff?
Yeah. So I sell quite a lot of like diorama materials. So I don't stock any like rail stuff, like rail model, like HRO track or rolling stock. I can order pretty much any of that, but generally, and I've spoken to a lot of railway modelers who say the same thing. Most railway modelers either already have their rolling stock, or two, they'll buy it like specifically, and they're usually buying it at shows and things where they can get it a little bit cheaper. Same for war game stuff. I don't have Games Workshop stuff, even though a lot of people have asked me about that, principally because I don't want to devote the amount of space that Games Workshop require from a shop to that. What I do is stock all the stuff that all of those three hobbies intersect on. So basing materials, texture paints, grinding tools, other tools, different types of glue, tufts, weathering materials, all that kind of stuff. Now, it might not necessarily all be on the website. It depends. What I try to do now is when a shipment comes in, I'll take the time it doesn't go out on the shop floor until I've actually put it on the website now, which I couldn't do before because otherwise there'd be nothing on the shop floor. So now most of it goes out there. So I just got a load of Mr. Hobby stuff in, for instance. I got all the Mr. Hobby Mr. Dissolve putty and different finishing surfaces and the putty and all that kind of stuff. Not the leveling thinner because it was out of stock. So that will all go onto the website before it actually goes out onto the shop floor. And I got some Meng model rivets the other day, actual rivets, like sheets of 3D printed rivets.
Oh my gosh.
And beer bottles as well, 1/35th scale beer bottles. So I've got Croissant in 1/35th scale. Mini Art do a fantastic range of these things now.
You can do a diorama of some guy like just K-Lied, Well,
yeah, because they actually have sets of. They do a British set and a German set for sure of like officers sitting at a cafe table. So and now you got the cheese and the pastries and everything to have together.
So folks can contact you via email or whatever through the shop and say, hey, do you have this? What do you have? What, whatever. And
so a couple of weeks ago, actually, I added an app to the store. So Shopify has a number of apps that you can add. They take some work to set up in the background, but one is a chat bot. So I now have a little chat function. So
that's cool.
One of the things people were saying was they couldn't find my contact information from the website. It was a bit difficult, and having gone into it, I can understand that because I couldn't find it either. So now it'll answer stuff like that. Where will your contact details, and you can just get it. It'll answer automatically. So I'll answer some of that automatically, and then if there is something there that isn't answerable, it actually just shoots me an email through the chatbot thing. So that's got a lot easier now for people to get in touch, because some people were finding they were emailing and it wasn't getting through to me. I think it's just because my spam filter was pretty hot. Just erred on the side of caution by a big margin, I think.
It just swept everything away.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of stuff from your shop, I found that you had it, but it just wasn't on your website. So just
Yeah,
asking you about it, you're like, oh yeah, man, I got this, or I can order it, or I just got it, or yeah.
yeah, and the stuff on the website is probably about 65% now of what I've got in the shop. So I've been going back and adding bits in. As I say, when orders come in, like the Revell order came in, I had a Tamiya order come in as well the day before. So that doesn't go out now onto the shop floor until it's in the website. So the website's gradually populating. But yeah, by far and away the easiest way is just send a chat request. Just ask. There's been a couple that come through in the last couple of days actually. So one of, I'm not sure if Gary's in tonight, Gary Hilder, but he asked me about some outlaw paints.
He was in
So I was
there.
able to check today just to make sure that all those are in stock, which they are. So yeah, it's just unfortunately, as with all things, takes time. I also see Matt has popped in. Good evening, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
See you. I like that. That's a good. It's actually a good kind of segue into skill levels. I was asked this a while ago, both on the channel and in the shop, about skill levels on the boxes of kits. Before I say anything, what's your experience of that, John? When you see a Revell kit and it says like skill level 4, or Airfix do the same thing,
I trust it. So, especially if it's the Revell Germany, So if I do a skill level 4 or skill level 5, it's not the end of the world. I think for most folks, you can do, you just take your time, and that, but it's not a deterrent. I think they do that to sell them, right? So that you think, oh man, I'm getting a great kit. I'm getting a high level kit. There's going to be a lot of parts. This is going to be good for the money, or what have you. And again, for Revell Germany, the engineering is good. So yeah.
Yeah, I have a slightly different view on
Cool.
skill levels
Tell
in
me.
kit. I'm not sure if you actually plotted out, if we got all the YouTubers, all the YouTube modelers together, and we all did different levels of kits and plotted how hard we found it on a graph, I think it would be like a snowstorm. I don't think there would be any correlation between what skill level the manufacturer said it was and how hard we found it. I think there might be some grouping, but I think it would be pretty scattergun. I mean, I've seen level 3 kits, which have been much worse than level 5 kits. It's like, I think you're right. I think in some ways it's to sell kits, either like this is easy, so you can do it kind of thing, or like you said, this is an advanced kit, so that you feel like you're getting like either better or you're getting more. I'm not sure it really correlates to how difficult, the actual skill level, let's say, apparent in the kit. I think it's true for some things, like if you think of the Revell Platinum Edition ones, for instance, which include photo etch and stuff. It's like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
But for the general kind of level of the kit, I'm not sure.
4 and 5, there's no measurable difference between a Revell 4 and a Revell 5. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a 5-point scale, if you think about some of the most simple Revell kits, right, the easy click kits and stuff, which aren't necessarily even that easy, compared to like the Technics level or the the London bus they did, right? Which by all counts is a really nice kit. I mean, it's huge, but disparity in that compared to an easy click kit, I think is more than 4 levels of difference.
Right.
It's a very coarse, I think it's a percentage, 1 to 100 or 1 to 10 even might be more useful, but 1 to 5 I think is a little bit coarse to give any useful kind of stuff other than saying it's a starter kit or it's for more advanced modelers. But each to their own. Dave gifted 5 Men's Model Moments memberships. Thank you very much, sir. That's much appreciated.
You are awesome.
I have no idea how that works, by the way. I've seen people do it on other channels as well. I don't know how that works. I don't know who gets those memberships or where they go, but they're very much appreciated. Thank you.
That's awesome.
There we go. Thanks for the gifted sub. That's where they go. Perfect.
Yeah.
That makes it very, very easy.
I think they get to like click or whatever,
I see. I see. That's a very good point. Good lighting. Again, it's one of the things I mentioned I think it's in the essential tools. It might be the intermediate modeling tools that I mentioned it in the video. Good lighting is really important. It's super important. If you look at any painting channel, never mind about modeling channel, they will talk about lighting. If you want good daylight balanced LED, like high lumen lighting, don't strain your eyes. You only get one set. So this is an interesting one. And good evening, Doc Brown, as well.
Yeah.
Good to see you. A lot of people talk about sort of outgrowing 70-second kits and graduating to bigger builds. I think that is a generally accepted kind of progression. I'm also not quite sure it's true, despite the fact that I said earlier that I've kind of gravitated that way. Because if you think about it, actually 70-second kits, because it's a smaller scale, it's actually harder to get the equivalent levels of detail. So I think, especially if you've watched Plasmo in the last 6 months, if you've seen the last, I think, 4 or 5 kits you've done have all been 1/72nd scale. And I wonder if that's because he's pushing himself, because it's harder to get the representation of detail in the smaller scale. So it's more challenging, for a very experienced modeler. So I wonder almost if it's like you start at 72nd because they're smaller, they're cheaper, you can get away with more kind of thing. Then you go to 48th and 35th scale kind of stuff because there's more detail. And then you go back to 72nd scale because you want the same levels of detail, but now you're going to make it smaller, which makes it harder. So you grow. It's like putting the extra weight on an exercise bike. You start off with nothing on there, you put a bit more on, and then you really rank it up, to make it hard for yourself. That's the one that I recommend as well, Jim. The LED. There's 2 versions that you can get. Amazon, they're all around £20 or so. They have different. I think they've got 5 different levels of magnification. Little ones that you can clip in, and you can either wear them as glasses. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, but man, the light thing doesn't work. So it's a hit or miss, right? I can press this. This is the, it tells me what the charge is, but it should light this up.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and it doesn't. So
mine works, but I always forget to charge it. I mean, if you've got good lighting, you don't need it anyway, because the light
Yes.
it gives is
Yeah.
pretty minimal, I
Yeah.
think. I think that's a very good. So I think this is where model clubs come in, right? If you've got a model club, whether that is a local thing or even an online thing, where you've got experienced builders that can give little tips and tricks. And I think that's one of the things that, like tonight, getting different modelers in, getting different opinions about things, like Airfix and Chill, like our YouTube channels. That's kind of what we're trying to do is, we want to show, what we're doing, but also impart some of what we've learned along the way, so that other people don't have to make the same mistakes we do. Because that's exactly it, right? It's far easier to bring people into the hobby, to guide them, rather than just say, here's a kit, get on with it. But you're absolutely right. And if you've got a local model club, I think it's a great thing. I miss mine, that I had back in the 90s. But now I've kind of substituted that with, Discord and YouTube, the online presence, the social media side of things now, I think has been able to expand that. And I think especially I don't know about you, John, but in the US, you have such a large area. If you're not in a city, I guess it's difficult, right?
Yeah, I'm in a, I guess it's a city now. It's about an hour north of DC. It's called Frederick. We have one model shop.
Wow.
Yeah. That's it. For like 200,000 people. Yeah.
But do you have local model clubs, or is it just too dispersed?
So the local model club is Maryland based. It's
Right.
the whole state. It's like nothing. Yeah.
Just the state. Yeah.
Yeah. Out of millions, there's maybe 50 of us. Yeah.
Is that just why do you think that is? Because I know I sit between 3 counties in the UK, and our counties are, way smaller than. I think the entire UK can fit in California twice, so it kind of gives you an idea of the difference of scale. But I sit between 3 counties. There are at least 3 model clubs within an hour of me. And the population density here in the southwest isn't high. So why is it that you have more people? I'm guessing the kind of proportion of modelers is probably the same. The percentage per population. So why is it that you guys don't get together more? Do you think?
So I think the proportion of modelers is not the same. That's what I think it is. I think that the number of people like me who are modelers here, we're far and few between, versus UK or Europe or Japan or whatever. Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean,
topic for another time, I think.
Yeah. The density of model builders here is way less than what it is for you.
Because the US
in
market,
Maryland, at least.
Yeah. Because the US market is still, it's a huge market. In everything it's huge, right?
So in the Midwest, Rocky Mountain time zone, what do they call it? Mountain time zone? Yeah, that's correct. But not out here. Yeah.
I'm just scrolling down. There's a lot. We're way from the. I'm about an hour behind in the comments, and I'm where we are a couple of minutes off finishing. So I'm scrolling right to the present. And I'm going to just go back. So apologies if I didn't get a chance to cover your comments, guys. Well, yes. Australia has all of the problems that we've talked about on a bigger scale. And that includes spiders and snakes as well. Just looking back, just trying to see if there's any obvious questions here. I don't want to kind of run off without trying to answer at least any direct ones. Do you think Airfix will do a new tool, 148th or larger English electric lightning in the future? I have done last 148th, but it needed a lot of aftermarket. What do you think, John?
The lightning it's a wonderful looking, plane. Do you think Airfix will do it?
Yeah, it's.
I doubt it. Not a new tool. Yep.
Yeah, I mean they've done Stranger, right? But the fact is that I mean I did that kit not too long ago as well, and it's not a bad kit. I mean, I think if they maybe did a kind of what Hella have been doing, kind of went back and sort of refreshed the molds a little, maybe,
Yes.
or maybe added a sprue or two of
Clean them up. Yep.
Yeah, additional pieces maybe, but I think they just need to re-release it, to be honest, because you occasionally see those Lightnings model shows, and they're fairly expensive for a decent kit, but a decent 90s kit. They're not don't hold up to a 2020s CAD designed electrospark welded tool. It would be nice. Would they do it? It's a hard one to answer because the Lightning sells. It's like the Spitfire, right? It does have a cult following, a cult status. So it's kind of would be a safe bet if they did a similar thing to the 90s kit and did one that could be an F1, an F2, an F3, and an F6. If they did one that could cover all of the toolings of it, they could easily get the money back on it. But if they're doing that, they're not doing something else, right? They're not doing a Jaguar. They're not doing a Tornado. They're not doing whatever. So, yeah, difficult one to answer.
Yep.
Academy decals are hit and miss. How do you feel about that, John? You've done an Academy kit more recently than me.
Yes. So the new Academy kits, they're cartographed. They're very fine. They're very delicate. I thought they were wonderful. I only had an issue with the ones that were very long but very thin, right? So they broke.
Yeah. So Jane, to be fair, the FX videos do show to put some glue on some cardboard before applying out. Yeah, it's a fair point, but I think the thing with Airfix is the lack of consistency. Is that the starter set instructions still show direct application, so it's just like it's a bit mixed messages. Because absolutely, yeah, putting on some cardboard is kind of essential, but it's a fair point that they are addressing in some respect at least. Okay. That's a very very true. What do dogs do on their day off? They can't lay around. That's their job. Let me have a look. I'm sort of going backwards, so I'm picking up on the end of some of these threads. Apologies. That is a good a good point. If only Bandai made an aircraft kit to show us how it's done. It's an interesting one that they don't enter the sort of scale model space, other than obviously they do some of the Star Wars stuff, but they haven't really gone in. I think if they did, people would complain about the price, because the 72nd scale Star Wars stuff is not cheap. So I'm selling the A wing considerably under its RRP, and it's £50. The B wing is 60. I think the RRP is $69.99 or $79.99, something like that. And you know, the B wing is sort of like, I don't know, like a Maryland sort of Bristol Beaufighter kind of size-ish, I guess. The A wing is like a 1/72nd scale World War II fighter, maybe a little bit bigger. So I think if Bandai did do, you know, traditional scale subjects, people would like them, but they'd be twice the price of other manufacturers. If you think an Edward kit, you can get a nice Edward 1/48 scale kit for £30. So, yeah. Just checking over these. I think I've covered most things. If I haven't, apologies, and I'll try and cover your questions next time. I think probably, as Moss says in Airfix and Chill, the way to do it is clearly put question if you want something addressed in the chat, because once we get talking, well, I mean, I can do it by myself. I can go off on tangents by myself without any problems, as you've seen. But especially, you know, when there's more than one of you, it's difficult to kind of chat about a subject and keep an eye on the comments. So apologies if I didn't get to your question if you had one tonight. Please feel free to comment on the video, because this will obviously be on the channel afterwards, and I'll try and get to it at that point. But other than that, thank you very much, guys and girls, for coming in tonight and joining us for a midweek. It's a very, very horrible wet day outside. We had a thunderstorm earlier this evening, so I appreciate the relief from a horrible, horrible outside weather, and you guys coming on tonight. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you found some of it interesting, if not enlightening. I think, in summary, yes, there are some brands which definitely are more starter friendly, and I think there is a progression through brands, but also through scales and subjects as you go through your modeling journey. And I think it's definitely one we should perhaps explore a little bit more in different ways in the future. But John Alec, thank you very much for joining me, keeping me company for the last hour or so.
Thank you for having me, Alex.
If any of you guys haven't checked out John Alec's channel, please do. It's John Alec Scale Modeling. He spells modeling wrong, but he's an American, so we'll let him.
Right.
But
what Alan says too. Yeah, I know.
Or is it John Webster? He's got a lot to answer for. No, thanks again as always, John. Pleasure. And
thank you,
well, I'll see you on the next Airfix and Chill, I'm sure, if not before. Otherwise, guys, the next part of the video definitely out on Saturday. Now I've taken a bit of a break with all of those catalogs, and be interested to see what your comments are on the final result of that. So have a great one. Have a great rest of your week. Take care. Stay safe, and see you soon. Cheers, guys.